So when you usually do them, how do you do them, Lee?
What do
Like
you mean?
the when you usually do the webinars, do you do them
Well,
with?
like as an example, I have one for ed tech, and they have this is a big webinar education thing, and it's similar to this, but there's like 1,000 people on. So clearly, I
Mhm.
can't see anybody. I don't even know if they have that technology, but every time I've done these things, it's like a Zoom session, so I can see people, which feeds me immensely.
Got it.
I found that as an online professor, that really helped me be effective. It doesn't matter either way, but that's usually how I've done them. But it's not, talking to myself is not
Right.
fantastic.
Yeah.
So I will definitely probably talk to you.
Go for it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm still not used to talking into a screen. It's
I just
uncomfortable.
with my students, it's easy because they know they've got to respond, they've got to have the cameras on, and sorry, it got easier. I wouldn't don't want to say it was easy. It got easier because I got better at the format after a year and a half at home.
Are you still doing virtual courses at the
Uh,
college?
I would be, sorry, I wouldn't be, but I'm on sabbatical right now, which
Oh,
means,
that's right. That's right.
yeah, which means I basically don't have to go anywhere. Um, that's gonna get wet. I'm gonna grab something real quick. Can you hold on?
Yeah, we need to give people, those of you who, some folks have already joined. You can see the participants. We have some people who are on, but we'll probably give everyone.
Can they see me right now?
Yeah, we're
Okay,
recorded right now.
I'm just gonna put this stop video on for
Sure.
me because I got to step
Okay.
out real quick.
Okay. Good morning. If you're joining us, we're going to give probably a couple minutes and maybe start this up at 11:05. Welcome back. We'll probably give it, I don't know, a couple minutes, Lee. It's
Okay,
11:01.
cool.
So what's the date your book's going public?
It's supposed to be April 19th, but who knows with the global supply chain stuff with paper and ink and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's supposed to be there. I've done like probably 4 or 5 podcasts. So those will drop. Similarly, I'll jump on like Glenn Crooks on Soccer FC or whatever that is, on Sirius XM. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so just some fun stuff leading up, and yeah, so we'll see. I mean, I've gotten a lot of buzz about it, and I'm I'm pretty proud of it. So that doesn't come easily for me. I'm super critical of my own writing, and yeah, but I'm pretty excited about this. And part of why I'm excited about the book is because I had great editors. You know, like editors they're like makeup artists. They look at me and they go, "This guy's got something," and then they make me up, and then I look like a runway model, which it's certainly not easy, but that's how I feel about my writing when you have editors. And honestly, they're like amazing, amazing, amazing editors.
That's great. And what's the title of your new book?
Talent zones, which is really I'm centering today's discussion around that because that topic I'm pretty passionate about in terms of talent in kids and the development of talent in kids and how that looks. And I'll put talent in quotes, and since everybody can see me, you can see my air quotes. Um, because I'm just not convinced it's so obvious. You know what I mean? Even though we treat it, especially in soccer, that I've been a part of, as obvious. Or we can pick them. I can pick
Right.
them. It's
Right.
like, can you?
Based on
So
what? Right.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to your talk. We may start up and just are you a PhD? I don't know if you're a doctor or not. Is that
PhD.
you are? Okay.
Yeah,
Um, okay. Well, we'll go ahead and is it all right if we get started, Lee? Does that
let's
work
do
for you?
it.
Okay. Good morning, those of you who are able to join us. I'm Rick Fullerton. I'm the Club Services Coordinator for NorCal Premier. Really excited that with us today presenting a webinar is Dr. Lee Hancock. Just a brief introduction, and then Lee, I'll just turn it over if that's okay. But
Yeah.
Lee is a tenured university professor. He's an expert in education and performance psychology. He's worked at world championships. He's worked at the Olympics, done work with youth, with college, with professional athletes and teams. And is currently working with U.S. soccer, designed content and does presentations on sports psychology for the A licenses, for the Academy Director license. And Lee's also written one or more books. He's about to publish another book, and conducts workshops on a variety of topics, including developing talent in diverse populations in education and sport, helping kids manage pressure and build motivation and confidence, and helping coaches and parents identify and maximize the development of talent. So we're really excited to have Lee with us. And Lee, if I may, I'll turn it over. Thanks for being here.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. These webinars are always interesting because in essence, I'm talking to myself or I'm talking to you. So talking to the group who I can't see, if and when you have questions, just ask, and then you can take me off on a tangent and I'll try and answer them. And, because I have a PowerPoint to get through, but, that's like, again, talking to a screen. So I'm much better when I feel much better. I don't know if I'm much better. That'll be your choice. When I interact, because I feel like then I'm making a difference. So, yeah, I mean, I'll take the screen and I'll kind of chit chat a little bit about my journey, kind of into what we're talking about here, and so I can see you on my second screen, which I like. And I can't pull up questions there, so you're gonna have to see. You're gonna
Sure,
have
I'll
to
do
tell me.
that.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so you've got my screen, Rick?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So I'm gonna keep it like this with the window because it's funny, because as I was doing the US soccer licenses and stuff like that, I found that this way was just easier to keep that second screen up, which I need when I'm doing those, and we need it for my students when I'm a professor. So, yeah, I mean, this is the topic we're gonna talk about. That's the cover of my book. But I honestly, I've been lecturing about and putting workshops and curriculum together for these concepts in this book far before this. But it makes a nice opportunity for me to talk about really the book and the content in it, which is ultimately, I want you to take something with you so that, as an example, you can use something with your kids tonight at training. That's always my goal when I work with teachers and coaches. It's like, how can I help you implement something with your kids tonight? So, yeah, I mean, that's me. I've been doing this for a long time. I was actually just talking to my wife and I said, oh, we're gonna have my 50th this year, and build it around the World Cup because it's in December. I'm like, and we're gonna all day. It's all gonna be all day. So it's like, yeah, wow, I've been doing this a long time. Yeah, so I interact with folks on Twitter, when I tweet, which is basically once a month, which I know I've got to do more. Sayeth, my publisher, and a couple of other people I've spoken with recently. So I'll try to do that more. But if you guys ever want to hit me up, or you want to poke around on my website and hit me via email on there, I'm happy to answer anything you want me to. So, yeah, the majority of my work has centered on soccer. I played in college, and I played a little bit after college in the old USISL for anybody who is my age. And really, my career petered out before it really got going. And I was always interested in coaching. So I did all my licenses, and I've coached everything from, under 18 girls and boys to under 5 AYSO when my kids were just starting out, which was so fun. And so I really try, for me, it was always like, well, how can I make an impact with on the game if I didn't play at the highest level? How could I contribute in a unique way? And that's really why I continued to go to school. But it was also about answering questions about kind of my own failures as an athlete, and difficulties as a student, and difficulties as an athlete, and really to kind of build on that. And so that's really where I took my research and writing in the last probably 10 years, 15 years. Yeah, and so that's kind of my focus. So what I wanted to talk to you guys about today was this idea of talent. And, this is where I kind of asked the rhetorical question in this particular case is, what is talent? And can you spot a talented kid? And I ask this, and I ask myself this question, probably 7 or 8 years ago when I started writing the book. And it's basically like a word a day is what it boiled down to. But I put it down so many times because I'm like, what are you trying to say, and why are you trying to say it? And part of it is because you don't know. Okay, you think you have a sense of what a talented kid is, but what does that mean? Who does it? Who is the meaning for? What happens when kids are labeled talented? What happens when they're labeled not talented? And all of those questions really started to drive me. And part of it was my own kind of upbringing, where I was in the principal's office more than I was probably in the classroom. I would get in trouble. I couldn't sit still. I was definitely this kid, and it took me a long time for somebody to believe in me and for me to believe in myself. And the early label of getting in trouble definitely got me in trouble, more and more and more. And it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, which I talk about. But, you look at, these kids, which I pulled something from your area, who's to say which one of these is going to make the first team? Who's to say which one of these castaways at 12 doesn't come back at 15, which I did Dan Abraham's podcast yesterday. It'll be out in, I think, May. And we were talking about those kids that fall out at 12 and some get to come back at 15, but what does their support system look like? And of course, I love this picture of Harry Kane, when he was basically an outcast, and maybe that's too strong of a word, from Arsenal, and then moved into Tottenham. And all of a sudden, he's scoring goals for fun and in bunches, and certainly is one of the most prolific scorers for England in recent years. And so that drove me. And so as I asked this question and I open up in the book, it's like, which one of these kids is talented? And sometimes, the question, when you think about it in sport, because I wrote it for sport and education, it's like you can look at a kid and you go, he or she is talented. Well, why? Well, because they have these early markers that we like: big, strong, tall, fast, technical, whatever you value. Okay. A kid in the classroom can sit still, can raise her hand, can raise his hand, checks some early boxes. Okay. But then I started to go, well, what happens when your kid isn't talented? And I say your kid because I've been there with my sons. I have 3 sons that play and that are obviously in the classroom. And so I watch them kind of go through their ups and downs. And as I watched it, I started to see little things emerge. And then I started to dig into what talent really was. And, it got me thinking, so you have a group of 1 through 10 kids. And okay, the first one is talented. Clearly you can see he or she is good at what they do. The second one, maybe. The third one, maybe. Well, what about numbers 4 through 10? Well, okay. And then as we're doing this, and I do this in workshops and discussions, it's like, you get to 9 or 10, you go, oh, that kid's got no talent. And I go, well, that's really funny you say that, because that's your kid. And it doesn't mean as much if it's not your kid sometimes, but if it's your kid, somebody goes, your kid isn't talented, then that sends them down this whole world of what do you get when you're labeled. Okay. And when you're labeled as talented and you go through door number 1, you get a lot of great teachers, great curriculum, high expectations, great facilities, which has been written about in a lot of books, which again was a lot of the impetus for me to dig into this. Like Outliers, The Talent Code. I mean, these kind of pop culture books, but then what happens to the untalented? Okay. Well, the untalented is really interesting because sometimes they make it because they've got grit and grind and an ability to dig in and get stuck in and have support at home. And then a large majority of those kids don't make it, and it's like, could they make it? And I'll use the numbers for education. Could numbers 2 through 10 who are not gifted and talented at some point be talented and improve and get better? And so as I started to consider this and had started to think about it, I really dug into, well, what am I trying to say and how can I help? And ultimately, and you'll see this in a few minutes when I talk about it, it's about the um, the perception of talent and whose perception, and then the environment that's created around the kid. Okay, which I think is massive, and again has been written about in a few ways. But I wanted to kind of throw it out differently, and then also put a one-stop shop together for teachers, for coaches who have, and parents, for kids who are deemed untalented. Okay, but also for the kids that are deemed talented, because that isn't always the blessing that you're hoping it should be at 13, because all of a sudden that kid is heaped praise upon them, and then maybe they don't work as hard or they don't get the value of failure, you know? So I wanted to go down this road and really kind of explore the term talent and what it meant. And so, of course, then I looked to some major folks who are, you know, infamous or famous for early failure. And Maya Angelou, Thomas Edison are education pieces, and both were told that they weren't very smart when they were little, for lack of better terminology. There are stories behind those that I recount in my book. But also these athletes, you know, this particular goalkeeper, he's going to Arsenal. This particular guy, you may or may not know, but his name's Tom Byer. Tom Byer is pretty famous in the world of youth sports and youth development. Tom was kind enough to write my foreword. This guy, you may or may not know, he's in your area, Jimmy Conrad. Jimmy definitely had to fight for everything he got, and Jimmy is a friend of mine. And so I've seen his upbringing, and it's like, of course, the Michael Jordan, he didn't make his high school basketball team discussion, right? And I put a little picture of me too, because I was definitely that kid. So I started to get this picture in my head, and then I started to think about some things, and it's like, from whose perspective are we looking at talent, and why does it matter? Like, are we looking at talent from our perspective as the talent identifiers, or are we looking at it from the perspective of the kid? Because that kid, and as you'll look and see the definitions, is dying to get better, dying to have somebody spot his or her talent. And then what I also talk about is the environment, and I go much further into these things. And oddly enough, I dropped my kids off at training yesterday, and there just happens to be a brewery next door, so I may or may not have gone over to explore said brewery. And they had a paper that was beer, the beer paper, which is tremendous. So I sat down and read the paper. And this quote is just tremendous. And I thought, I got to include this. And the guy asked, between talent and work ethic, which do you think is most important? I think you can't deny that both are needed. Talent is easily wasted if it's not correctly applied, but hard work needs proper direction in order to effectively achieve. Maybe love is the real key. If you love what you do, you'll find the motivation to focus your ability and keep improving. I thought, beer answers so many questions, and here it is again. And I just thought this is so cool, because that's basically, this here is probably all 10 of the talent development zones and the chapters that I write about, is how can we help create this environment and look at it perhaps from a kid's perspective, and how we help him or her when we get them in our second team. Okay, when we get them and they haven't made the travel team or whatever the team is, and they get home and we have to wrap them in a hug and deal with their failure and look at it and go, what an opportunity we have, son, you know? Or how do we get this when you get the kid who makes, you know, the earthquakes as an example, and has to leave his club team that he's been with since he was 7, and he's 15 now. And how do we help him embrace this as an opportunity? Not that he's made it, but he has made a step towards it. And so that's really kind of where I wanted to go today, and talk about really kind of why I've been focused on this so much in probably the last 10 years, as I've put together these programs for schools and clubs, and really a lot of the content that I put into the US soccer, because I was tasked with redoing all of the sports psychology content for the A youth, the A senior, and academy director courses. And quite honestly, a chunk of that is from the research and writing that I've done for this book and other projects. So you can kind of see that right there in what I wrote about. And I do believe this talent as a journey, not a destination, piece. And I think the environment that surrounds the kid, which I'll show you some research to back that up, is just a massive piece in how we eye the development of talent. And I'm so passionate about this too, because again, my kids, but also because I think we lose out on so many kids, whether they're from a low socioeconomic status area, whether relative age effect, which many of you may or may not be familiar with, plays a part. That's the idea of, a kid at 12, a kid at 14 really looks like a 12-year-old, and their skeletal maturation or mental maturation is just so low. Whereas sometimes, a 14-year-old is like a 17-year-old. We've all been to a game where, a kid's on the field and it looks like he's driven his car there, and so the relative age effect makes a difference both for the early maturation kid and the late. And so I thought, God, I'm so passionate about this. Let me put it out there. So that's this. And I'm going to go into like how I define talent. And I'm going to go through one of these talent zones, which again, what I hope to do is give you something you can use tonight at your trainings. But I'm going to stop right now and maybe turn it over to Rick and just see if there's any questions and can stop me from rambling.
Thanks, Lee. So if anyone has questions, just go ahead and put them in the Q&A. That would be best. There aren't any yet, so I would say just keep rolling along. Thank you.
Cool. So when I first started going down this road, my book was going to be called Talent with a question mark. And because I really wanted to know what the definition of talent was. And I wanted to really explore where it came from. And again, part of that is because in our lexicon, I suppose, in our current vernacular and how we use talent, it's very much it's innate and built. Like, okay, that's cool. Like you have some gifts, which I understand. I see a question pop up, Rick, and I'll answer it in a second. But it's also built, okay. And my thing was like, well, what's the percentage? What's the percentage? Okay, because you can't know. So I thought, well, let me look into the definition of talent. What's the question?
Sorry, I was muted. The question is, what is the best way to help convince parents and players to see that putting in work on their own outside of training is needed to maximize their talent?
I'm going to open up with it. I have no idea. But at the same time, I believe role models are critical. Okay. And as an example, finding role models for those. So I'll take the two extremes. The early maturing kid, okay, who was killing kids at 13 because he or she is just physically dominant. Okay, it's more prevalent on the male side because that testosterone kicks in an early maturation kid, and he is, smashing kids, and he gets in the car and the parents go, "You're big time," and the kid goes, "I am big dad." Okay, yeah, that's not helpful, right? So I think talking to that kid and finding a role model as an example of an early maturing kid who failed and early maturing kid who succeeded because of, as an example, growth mindset and achievement goal theory, which is the actual concept I'm going to walk through today because it's a pretty common one. So it's about having that conversation early and often with that particular family and allowing that kid to understand he still has a ton of work to do. Okay, because I think those kids are also often overlooked. It's not just the little ones. Mine was a late maturing kid, and I do feel he was overlooked just in terms of the early selection, which I get. He's not a sexy choice as an example. Because little. So the big one, it's like keeping his eye on the prize by finding role models, failures who didn't work hard, successes that did work hard, that were big kids would be my first one. The little one is very much the same. But the little one, frequently, it's about keeping him or her in love with the game, keeping him or her motivated, allowing him or her to understand how important they are and how future you isn't necessarily current you, which is a big discussion in our house. Okay. Then to get back to your, and so there's, and I do write about that. And this idea of providing opportunities for intrinsic motivation as an example, and getting him to understand that you're on his team and we can do this and you can continue to change. But it's also about providing that kid role models, and discussing kids that were late matures and finding research to back that up. Okay. But with both of those, so it's really about individual conversations, finding role models relative to them who were like them when they were little. But I also think the environment that you put them in is critical, super critical. And it's not always at a pro environment. It's not always at a top ECNL club or MLS Next club. It is the right fit for that particular kid. And the right fit is a coach who understands that it takes time to develop and will provide those opportunities for the kid to be nurtured and fail and go ahead and make mistakes in the game. But say to them, you've got to go and work off the field, So I hope that answered that question. Yeah, and the environment, like I said, is, and I can talk about this later, but since I'm talking about it now, the environment and what that looks like doesn't have to just exist at a local club. It can exist at pro clubs and the biggest pro clubs where the directors and head coaches and establishments have an eye to the future and are willing to develop all of their kids. Okay, with an eye to, we don't know which ones are going to be talented. Okay, which I talk about in a few minutes as well. And I know that to be the case because when I was doing the research for this book, I went over to visit Jesse Marsh. So Jesse at the time was at Red Bull Salzburg. I assume most of you are familiar with Jesse. Jesse is currently at Leeds United and is the head coach and took over for Bielsa, which, here, take this. This will be a fun opportunity. And he's doing well. And Jesse's a friend from when he was out here in LA. But I went out there, and one of the things that we were walking around the facility at Salzburg. It's a very impressive facility. And he was recounting a story of a guy who he was interviewing for a position there. And this goes to the idea of the environment is critical and looking at every kid as if they can before they can't. And he was telling me about this guy, and Jesse was walking this guy around, and I do know the other guy, by the way, but I will not say his name. Jesse was walking this guy around, and Jesse was saying, this kid is going to be the next, and he named the Red Bull Salzburg player. Ooh, that kid is going to be the next, name the Red Bull Salzburg player. And he would say that about all the kids. And the guy goes, Jesse, they can't all be the next so-and-so. And his comment was very much like mine. It's like, you don't know which ones are going to be the next superstar if we provide them an opportunity to work hard, if we provide them the opportunity to be that guy, And so I just love that because the environment can exist anywhere. And the focus on talent in the future version of themselves can be anywhere. So I went to the definitions of talent. In 2019, it was here. 11th through 16th century changed a little bit in terms of a disposition and inclination. Biblical times, a lot of us would know, if you grew up with a Bible story anywhere around you about it was talent was like the weight of money, so if I had one talent, then it was worth like, $1, 2 talents was $2. But what's interesting, and I find this, and I write about this a little bit as well, is depending on where you went in ancient Greece or Assyria, I'm totally going to screw up my research and my geography, and any of the other places that use talent, a talent was different depending on where you went in ancient society, which I found really interesting because we value talents differently depending on where we are geographically and culturally. So I thought that's a pretty cool thing. And then I found this definition way back when, after I did just a little bit more research. And this got me thinking again about the perspective of who we're looking at talent. Are we looking at it to satisfy our adult needs of putting kids in boxes and labeling them, which we have to because we only have 20 spots available? Okay. But as we think about this, it's like, this was the original definition of talent: to bear, to endure the rigor of a thing, to carry a burden, to bring forward or apply. Think about this relative to a kid. That's a lot for any kid to bear, and as a parent, I watch my kids fail. I watch my kids not get selected, whether or not I watch my kids not get an A, and the pursuit of their talent, their ability is something that they bear. And so I thought, wow, if we can just kind of understand that and provide kids an opportunity to develop these things by me helping create these environments and giving you guys the tools to do that, I thought, wow, that's a really important perspective for me to take and for us to take and think about as we see kids come out to our training sessions and struggle through their improvement and the development of their talent. So that's where I started. And this is where I quickly went. This is Gagne's model of talent development, which is I won't go too far into it, but the idea is it's an education model. Okay. And this particular person, and this is how gifted and talented programs are run. 10% of kids are deemed talented. Really? 10%? Because they can pass a test or sit still? Okay. Or they happen to be bigger, bigger, stronger, and faster? That's a tough one. What about number 11? What about 12? If 12, what about 20? And so as I continue to dig, the environment is critical in the development of talent and what that environment entails. And there are certain things, including awareness, including motivation, including how to manage pressure and deal with confidence and these types of things. And so that's where I turn the majority of my attention. It's like, well, that's what we should be really hitting some of these bigger clubs and helping them, with the 20 that they pick, but also saying to 21 through 50, these are some things that we would like you to think about. And how can we help create an environment in the community where we can help develop these things as well, which again, this would be the concepts that I hit. Because truly there's zero evidence. Zero. There's nothing to say that a kid talented now will be a talented adult, or an untalented person will be an untalented adult, and I just think that's a really important piece. And I put some notes here to myself that I know innate ability exists. I'm not stupid. Okay. I know cutoff lines exists. I'm not stupid. But the more we can arm parents, the more we can arm smaller clubs, the more we can arm first teams, the more we can, arm professional clubs, the more we can create an environment where more kids have the opportunity to stay talented for longer and to really gain all the benefits of being selected, and you're going to see the first one I talk about is failure, because failure is super critical in being successful, as long as we can help perceive it correctly. So that's where I went. And of course, the problem isn't in the definition, it's the labeling and subsequent approach taken, and these are some of the things that I wanted people to consider as we started talking about talent. So very much in who I am as a human being, I try to be really practical, really pragmatic. Again, anytime I'm in my classroom with college students, I'm always trying to answer like, okay, how can I help? Like, how can I give you some tools to use? And that's really where I went right away in my research and in my practical writing. It's like, how can I give you something to be an effective talent development person, talent catcher, talent driver of the big kid, of the small kid. I use those as markers. And that's where I went with all of these. And thank God for the editor, because they just made it very education oriented as well as sport oriented, which I really wanted. Because again, I watch my twins, my oldest one, very typical firstborn, is fine in the classroom, driven, perfectionist, does well. You could probably drop him off on another planet, he'd be fine. The twinsies, not so much. School for them is an afterthought, and they can't sit still to save their life. They're very gregarious, very curious, and they've definitely been labeled. And my comment to them is always like, you're on your own path. Let's work through this on your own. You don't like the grade that you're getting. Let's look at that as an opportunity. let's not blame other people. And that's a really big thing in our house. And so again, I wanted to provide resources for the talented kid and the people who have those kids, and the untalented kid and the people who have those kids, which is why I settled on these research-based ways.
Hey Lee, before you move
Yeah,
on from this slide, can I ask a question on this slide?
let's hear it.
Because I think a lot of a lot of our audience are coaches and club directors, and I'm wondering, in looking at these slides, a lot of those bullet points sound important, but would you have any sort of concrete, specific recommendations on something that, for example, a director of coaching could do structurally inside their youth soccer club to maximize or promote some of the 10 objectives on your list here?
Yeah, let me go through that first one, because I think that one that I'm going to hit just is very easy to consider and very difficult to enforce. Okay, because it involves winning and losing and focusing on the process as opposed to the product, which again is easy in concept, but difficult when your team has lost a couple of games and the parents are thinking, we need to win this game. And it's like, do you? They're 10, but I know the reality of youth sports, and you lose too many games in a row and parents go, well, we're leaving. Yeah, I'm not silly, but I do think there is a way to maximize kids' opportunity to be successful if we focus on one thing over another, which is what I'll talk about here. So yeah. So let me get into this, because we don't have a ton of time left for me to hit the content. And anything I don't hit, I can send you the slides, Rick,
Great.
Or notes on the slides. So for me, failure is super important. It's one of the things, again, I allude to my kids because there's plenty of it. And for me, especially because, we do okay as a family. My kids don't want for much. I didn't grow up with very much, so it's a little bit different. And so anytime my kids have a chance to have a reality check by failing in the world that they live in is heaven to me. Okay. And get an understanding of what it means to fail and to have a very difficult time in a life where they're afforded opportunities to do things, And so we talk about failure in our house a lot. In fact, my oldest was confronted with something recently, and I texted him this. And of course, his reply was, okay, Dad. So which my reply was, I texted him again. So passive aggressive. But I love this. Okay. Because he was in tears about something, and we were talking about it. And I said, and I say this to them often, if I could wave a magic wand and make it all go away, I would never do that, because it's so important that we understand how important these moments are. And of course, I don't wish this, and neither did Chief Justice John Roberts. But wow, to be able to have this opportunity to look failure in the face, and for mom or dad, or for coach, or for teacher to go, I've got your back, which is also a huge thing in intrinsic motivation. And to say, this is a we thing, and I'll help you through this, and I'm going to support you no matter what. That's a very empowering statement for a kid who's struggling to find his or her talent. And so I go into growth mindset, which so many people are familiar with. And I include this in included this in the A youth and the A senior. In my A senior class, I had a bunch of MLS2 head coaches, USL head coaches, NWSL coaches, college coaches. And this is so important for pros and that age group and kids. Okay. So growth mindset is this. Again, I would assume if I asked people to raise their hands, they'd have a sense of it. Carol Dweck is a local for you guys. She's at Stanford, so this is her stuff. These are some of the things that kids say. But one of the great things about Carol Dweck's research is it's not based on her original research, okay? It's based on research that she worked on very early in her career when she was at the University of Champaign-Urbana in Illinois. And some very early papers of hers, including one from 1988 and 1992, were focused on physical education and physical activity in sport, okay? Which is awesome. okay? Because the stuff that you asked, Rick, and if I could talk to a director of coaching right now or coaches, would be some of the things I'll stress in the next slide. Her work is based on a theory called achievement goal theory. Now, it's a complicated slide, but also very simple. A kid, and these are two extremes, comes into your environment thinking about how they are successful. Okay, that's this environment. This is your practice session over here. They come into your practice session feeling successful if they try hard and work hard, or if they beat other people. Okay, so if I am the kid, I come into Rick's practice session, which is here. I go, I feel successful if I win. If I lose, I make excuses. I blame other people. I blame the referee. I have zero coping skills. Some kids, though, come in and go, I just want to work hard, try hard, get better. Okay. The truth is that most kids are a combination of both. Okay. But there are some extremes, and you'll see those in your teams. You know, those are the kids that, you know, when they're losing at Monopoly, those pieces are chucked across the room. I may have been that kid. Okay. But those kids are also very competitive, and they can be your game changers. If we as coaches, and this is to your statement, Rick, and question, if we can create a climate focused on improving, getting better, trying hard, self-referenced improvement as opposed to other referenced improvement, which you'll see me show on the next slide, as opposed to a win at all costs mentality, which I see all the time, on accident sometimes. You know, you walk into a practice session, it goes, it's a 1v1 activity, you need to beat that person. But it's really like, if the kid is continuing to lose, maybe he needs to try a different, you know, touch in a different direction, a different move. You know, maybe we need to give him an advantage of taking him on at an angle as opposed to straight on. Maybe he's losing because he's 12 going on 10 and playing against a kid who's 12 going on 15, right? And so if we create this performance climate, it's okay as long as they keep winning, okay? But nobody always wins. It doesn't happen that way. There are so many times when losses happen where we played great, you know, and you know this in youth soccer, in particular of any sport. You can play a tremendous game and lose 1-0, you know? You could play an average game and lose 1-0 to a team like North Macedonia. Well, it's too soon, Italian fans, too soon. But you know, focusing on the process is super critical, and creating an environment where we can reward improving and learning and getting better provides opportunities to get these things as opposed to these things. Because the truth is, if you have a youth club that is focused on winning instead of improving and getting better, you're less likely to get these things. So as a DOC, and this is really hard, okay, but I'll blow up my oldest son's coach. So my oldest son plays for Patty Doors, and this guy named Teddy Chronopoulos. A very good team. He's in the U19s. And they, the coach is frequently talking about improving and getting better, and will play kids in critical situations. And if they make a mistake, he isn't bombing them. You know, and this is a team that does well. You know, they did really well last year in terms of getting to the national semifinals, and are doing fine this year. And he continues to develop players for the long run, right? Who are able to handle these things because he focuses on this. So how does a DOC do this? Well, you know, you talk about the importance of improvement in learning. You know, hopefully you have a curriculum that you can point to and show the improvements. And sometimes, you know, it will lead to a win, and sometimes not. And I understand, you know, you definitely have to have wins, you know, to keep people excited. But in order to get wins, you've got to focus on the process. And you only have to look as far as Coach K, you know, the Duke head coach, and listen to his words as you head into the Duke UNC game, which is a major college basketball game and one of the biggest rivalries in all sports. And Coach K is not talking about winning and losing. He's talking about the mentality. He's talking about playing good basketball and process. So does Steve Kerr, right? So does Popovich. So does Pep, you know, and all of these coaches, it's always about the process. Now, it's easier when you're winning, okay? but it's also so important because what it provides is an opportunity for kids to feel less pressure. Okay. For parents to see that there's learning going on. And ultimately, that's really what we're all responsible for, even though I know the climate of youth sports is winning, you know? And so how do you do that? Well, those are some of the things that I've used in the past, again, directly out of research. So when a kid does win a 1v1, that's great. Winning isn't bad. There's nothing wrong with winning, but it's not about, oh, I won. It's like, oh, great job trying that move to get the result. You know, great job improving on that skill that you've been working so hard on. Put the win back in the process, right? Because let's face it, if you win, it's not, you know, it's not all about the result. It's about what you did to get to the win. Failure as fuel, help athletes understand mistakes are an opportunity to grow, try new things. With relative age effect, which I talked about earlier, manage the older kids and the younger kids, the bigger kids and the smaller kids. Manage comparisons, right? Because kids will go, well, he's getting an opportunity to get pulled up to the first team. Why aren't I? You know, well, what are the things that you think you need to work on? You know, these are the things that he is being called up for, you know, or she's being called up for. How can you improve and make, if they're motivated by that, let them be motivated by that. But of course, it has to be on what they can control and what they can get better at. And let's talk about winning. I'm never one to shy away. I'm competitive. I like to win. When you talk about winning, which is inevitable, talk about it in terms of learning to win or doing these things to win, right? Which again, if you think about the best coaches in the world, the best teachers in the world, it's not about, you know, getting an A on the test, although it's about getting an A on the test. It's not about winning, but it's about winning. Okay, so how do you do that? Well, you do it on process things. In order, if you do these three things, you'll likely be successful and you'll get the result that you want. It doesn't always work out that way, but the more often you do it, you know, the better you get at it, the more likely you're going to get a result that you're looking for. So, yeah, I mean, that's really kind of what I want to say. How do you do it? So I talk about this as well. For me, it's about building awareness, you know, in kids and parents and coaches, you know, about what are you stressing as an example. Educate them on who they are and aren't, what their super strengths are and what areas to improve are. Like, okay, you're just a little bit too focused on the outcome. How can we get you to focus on the process and the things that you do well, but also the things that you need to improve on? And then we make a plan. You know, how can we try to get better at this and implement, kind of create a mastery-oriented climate, which again I talk about, and then be vigilant in what you're doing. You know, and be purposeful and mindful in the language that you're using to stress process. But I'll answer the question in a second. But as you're thinking about, you know, kind of what makes a talented, you know, kid, it's a process. And that process takes a lot of twists and turns and ups and downs. And, you know, never have I been so aware of this idea than watching my kids, you know, in school and in sport, you know, as they put themselves on the line. And I definitely have used all of these ideas, you know, as they fail and succeed, both in the classroom and in sport. And so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of share all of the things that I've collected over time and pass that knowledge on to, quite honestly, probably way better teachers and coaches than I'll ever be. But now you understand the research, you know, and if I can get you to have an open mind about whose perspective we're looking at talent from, and create that environment, then hopefully I've made an impact on the development of talent. So I can see the question. So what is your advice for dealing with parents who do not buy into the process long-term development plan? Patience is not a key quality in parents around the Bay Area, as they're used to immediate success and results. I mean, look, I am pretty aware of that because I live in an area that's similar. You know, I understand your area is probably a little bit more meta than mine. That's a good word. And so for me, I think it's about communication with those particular parents, you know, because I also know that you can't change everybody's mind. And so parents have to understand these are the values in our club. And hopefully they can see the improvement areas in their son or daughter and talking about those things and showing them the results of those. And she's gotten better at these 2 or 3 things. And you can see that in our report cards as an example, right? Or in our face-to-face meetings. So I think it's about providing an opportunity for them to see the touchable, tangible process improvements in individual discussions and in, as an example, report cards or meetings, and hopefully that they see the improvement in that. I don't have a magic wand to wave. I do know that if parents don't buy in, there's very little chance for a kid to move through his or her difficult times, because it's pretty easy to move to a different club, and have somebody else placate those requests. But I do think that individual meetings and providing touchable, tangible improvement showings have helped with groups I've worked with in the past. You mentioned about giving opportunity to players in terms of them being selected onto a team. How important is giving players an opportunity of adequate playing time once they're already on a team? I routinely see kids who are not considered the most talented on team lose motivation through lack of playing time. I mean, I have an easy one with that one. Having seen it in different areas, sports is an opportunity for kids to play. If you're not playing kids, how are they going to get better? So in my opinion, you have to play kids, and you have to find games to play them. I'll allude to my oldest son's coach and what I've tried to be when I've coached. I know that there are games where you feel you have to win. It's a state cup game. It's a final in a tournament. Okay, those are ones you again, I'm speaking in a cutthroat competitive climate. Okay, you play your better players if you want to. There must be some games along the way where kids can get playing time. Because in my opinion, even at pro clubs, which is why we pulled our oldest son out of one, if you pick the kid, it's your responsibility to develop him or her, period. Because you don't know. You just don't know. And so that is always my advice, to clubs and to parents and to coaches. Clubs to play the kids, parents to say, if your kid isn't getting time, how is she going to get better? How is he going to get better? So, I mean, I don't really know how to answer that question because I would lose motivation too. So for me, if you're a parent and your kid isn't playing, that's a red flag for me. If you're a club team and your bottom 5 players are getting 10% of time, that's not fair. That's not fair. And again, I understand it's like you got to win games, but it sounds like maybe that coach has to develop their players a little bit better. Anything else?
There's another question just came in. What objective measures of talent have you used in the past to evaluate athletes in team sports?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this is an easy one. For me, it's like if your field is a classroom, you are going to teach 10 things throughout your semester. The touchable tangibles are, is that kid improving on passing, on dribbling, on finishing? Okay. Sometimes it's in the form of goals. Sometimes it's in the form of chances on goals. You can track that data if you want to, but there's also an eye test. There's an eye test for, can you see that kid improving? And part of that improvement is also on the socio-emotional side of, is my kid excited to go to training? Is my kid feeling more confident? Is my kid able to move through more patiently than he or she was at the beginning of the year on mistakes? And so for me, it's like you could find 5 to 10 things that you're teaching or coaching during that particular semester, as an example, in your piece, And then you could track, chances or opportunities if you literally wanted to have an objective measure. But subjectively, you can tell if the kid feels more confident or looks more confident, And so I would use those markers because they're ones that you can directly and objectively go, these are what we worked on. This is what I'm trying to make sure that she does better at the end of the year. She's doing these things better. It may not be as well as she wanted to do, but she's improving on them. And then all of a sudden, those are some markers, would be my 2 cents and what I've done in the past.
Lee, this next question, it's actually it's very much in line with something I was going to ask you. And the question is, do you think it's a good idea to send a kid down to a second team or even to play recreationally where the player can develop better instead of trying to show that he can be in a level he's not reached yet? And if so, how do you explain it to the kid or the parent? And one thing I was going to add to that question, Lee, was I've heard people talk about, like coaches talk about the relative age effect and say, well, since we don't know if some of these late bloomers are going to be future D1 college players, future pros, then we need to put them on the A team. And others have thought, well, if the kid today, this 11-year-old is not at the A team level, but they're really at the C team level, then isn't that the right place for them today, where they can have appropriate challenge and have adequate success in order to build the things that you mentioned earlier, confidence, motivation, or because otherwise you're taking kids who today aren't ready to compete and experience success with better players and trying to put them in an environment where they really can't have success. So
Yeah.
I guess I just added to
Yeah, that's okay. I've got both those questions because my answer to Francisco is I do think it is a good idea to allow the kid the opportunity to play, as an example, more minutes in a second team, maybe. Okay, maybe that's part of the questioning and maybe it gets to yours too, Rick. But for me, having gone through this and having written some ways to move relative age effect kids and parents along this continuum, it's about communication. Really open and honest communication with the parents and the kid. Say, look, this is what we see in your son or daughter. We can tell he's little, or she's little. And I was a parent of one of these kids. My oldest was 5 nothing, and 100 pounds wet, and he's playing against kids that are massive and has since grown and is now 5'11". He's the tallest Hancock in history. And so, but part of that was the coach being patient with him, the coach and I communicating effectively and talking about these things and saying, listen, we're going to play you down. You're not getting demoted. Okay. You're not a lesser human being or person. What we're looking to see is, can you be a leader out there? Can you try your moves out there? Just go and try stuff. He or she might do well there and they might be terrible. And then when they come out, have a discussion about it. For me, the constant communication, Francisco, is what has worked well. As I've seen, as an example, you pop that kid into a second team. Rick, with yours, it just depends on the kid, because if the kid is just so good technically, are they really going to benefit from being around C players? No, there's no chance. But being in an A team, physically, they can hardly get a pass off because they're taking forever. So it's the Jesse Lingard effect where they had to play him down. But maybe it's this, again, discussion with the family. We go, look, we see long-term, this is where we see him. And he's going to train with these guys. But maybe once a week we put him in to be in the C game, so that we can watch him appropriately develop. I keep using the word him because I see that so often with boys because that testosterone just goes bonkers at different ages. So I just think it's about communication. I wish I had like a full answer, like do this, but every kid is different and handles failure and success differently, but the open communication with parents and an eye to how the kid is feeling in all of this, push him, pull, leave him alone, and second team, first team. And I just think allowing that flexibility and movability, saying to the kid, we got you, son. We got you. I value you as a human being. We're going to be patient here with you and you be patient with us. And anytime you're frustrated, let's talk, because then all of a sudden you're creating a dialogue. That's how I've seen it be successful. How do I feel about talented players playing up? Yeah, do it. you know, uh, but are they ready? And again, for me, it's a communication discussion, because is that particular, that kid may be big enough, but social emotionally, they may struggle with failure, and they may go, I don't want to do this. And what's the dynamic in the household? Is the parent then expecting the same thing when the kid plays up? It's like, you got to manage your expectations. The kid's going to struggle. So I just think in all of this, it's about communication with parents. I have found that once you engage parents in a rational manner, then you're doing everything you can to ensure that the child has every opportunity to be successful. If the parents screw it up, that's got to be on the parent, because I hate to say it, you're never always going to be successful with a parent.
And Lee, I'm wondering if you've run across any youth clubs, setting aside the professional clubs, but where they just were doing some things in terms of their structure or their organization that really impressed you, and you thought, wow, this is a really good best practice that other clubs should do.
I mean, I'm going to say I don't know enough. I can speak about people and what I know that they do. So Vanni is a friend of mine. He's now at the Galaxy. Their academy has traditionally not been very good, certainly not living up to the standard that it should be. Greg is putting a lot of work into that academy, and he is very open to new ideas. He's open to the process of things. He's massively into that in terms of his focus on best practices for what's best for kids as a human being. And that's just him. So I think he'll do well. I really like the work that Paul Holliker is doing out in Houston. I know he's a former guy from your area, but I think he's doing great things out there. But those are two that come to my mind in soccer. I would like to think that Dallas is doing a really good job, that NYCFC is doing a good job, that Toronto is doing a good job, but I'm not sure I know enough about the ins and outs of their academy to say whether or not they're doing it. Saldana does a decent job at LAFC. He's a buddy of mine, and he does a good job developing players. I don't know about the holistic approach. I haven't spent enough time there, but it's a hard one for me. I look at people, you know what I mean, and what they're going to bring to the table, because I don't know if the culture is deep enough in our academy system. Non-pro academies, I mean, look, Teddy's he's as good as they get at Patty Doors. He's as good as they get. Other ones, I'm sure there's brilliant ones. I don't know about your area. I know there's a couple clubs out there that are great, but God, I wish I knew more.
Any other questions? Okay, well, Lee, thank you so much. I have a couple pages of notes, and then, but maybe I won't need them if you're gonna share your presentation with us. Is that what you said
Yeah,
you might send
yeah.
me
I'll
that?
share. I'll share the notes from it for sure. Let me just pluck them out into a notes piece, and I'm happy to share some stuff.
Okay. Um, awesome. Well, yeah, thanks again, Lee. Fantastic. Really appreciate you coming on. And for those who attended, NorCal has a recording of the webinar, and we will share it along with a copy of the presentation and put it on our website for you. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thank you so much, Lee. Really
Cool.
appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks,
Awesome.
guys.
Just some folks saying thank you, Lee.
Yeah, cool.
All right. Thanks, Lee. Take care.
Cool.
All right.